In 1999, a first edition holographic Charizard came packed inside a booster box that cost about $4. Last year, one sold at auction for $500,000. That is not a typo. The same piece of cardboard that kids were trading at lunch tables is now selling for more than most houses, and Charizard is not even the most expensive one anymore. So here's the question nobody in finance wants to answer. How did a children's card game outperform the stock market? And more importantly, is it too late to get in? The answer requires understanding something that most financial advisors will never tell you, because it breaks their entire model. For most of history, investing meant one of three things: stocks, bonds, or real estate. You put money into something productive, it generated returns, and you got paid. But over the last decade, a completely different category has been quietly destroying that framework. Alternative assets, art, wine, watches, sneakers, sports cards, things with no cash flow, no dividend, no yield, things that are worth exactly what someone else is willing to pay for them. And here's the part that will bother you if you work in traditional finance. The alternative asset market is now valued at over $1 trillion, and collectibles specifically have outperformed the S&P 500 over the last decade. Not in every category and not every year, but the trend line is undeniable. Pokemon cards sit at the dead center of this story, and it is not because of nostalgia. It is because of three things that turn a hobby into a market: scarcity, grading, and institutional money. We will get to all three, but first, the numbers, because the numbers are absurd. The S&P 500 returned roughly 230% over the last decade. That is impressive by any standard. But according to the Citi Global Art Market Report, collectibles as a category returned around 250% over the same period. And within that, trading cards specifically outperformed nearly every other collectible class. The Card Ladder Index, which tracks the value of graded sports and trading cards, showed returns north of 400% between 2017 and 2022. Let me put that into something concrete. A PSA 10 base set Charizard was worth around $2,000 in 2016. By 2021, that exact same card was selling for over $350,000. That is not a category outperforming the market. That is a category operating in a completely different universe. And even after the 2022 correction, and there was a correction, we will get to that, vintage Pokemon cards in high grade held value significantly better than most growth stocks that peaked during the same window. The Nasdaq dropped over 30% in 2022. A PSA 10 first edition Charizard dropped from its peak, but still traded at multiples of its 2019 value. But here's the distinction that separates the people who made money from the people who lost it. Vintage high-grade cards tracked more like blue-chip assets during the correction. Modern cards tracked more like speculative growth stocks. Same hobby, completely different risk profiles. That split is exactly what separates collectors from investors in this space, and understanding it is worth more than any individual card. So, scarcity. When Wizards of the Coast printed the original 1999 base set, they had no idea what they were creating. The print runs were limited, the quality control was inconsistent, and millions of cards were opened, played with, bent, shoved into back pockets, and thrown away by children who had no idea they were holding anything valuable. What survived in pristine condition is genuinely rare. A PSA 10 grade, meaning a card in absolutely perfect condition, on a first edition base set Charizard has been given out fewer than 120 times, ever, out of millions printed. That scarcity is real, and it is permanent. They are not printing more 1999 first edition Charizards. They never will. This is where grading changed everything. PSA, Professional Sports Authenticator, grades cards on a scale from 1 to 10. Centering, corners, edges, surface. A PSA 9 Charizard might sell for $20,000. The same card with a PSA 10 sells for 10 times that. That gap is not cosmetic. It is structural, because grading did something that no amount of hype or nostalgia could do on its own. It transformed Pokemon cards from collectibles into a standardized asset class. Before grading, buying a valuable card was a trust exercise. You were looking at a piece of cardboard and hoping the seller was honest about its condition. After grading, it became a verified transaction, a serial number, a slab, a condition guarantee, and that is what opened the door for serious money. In 2020, Logan Paul paid $150,000 for a sealed first edition base set box, live on YouTube. The video got 10 million views. Within months, sealed boxes that had been sitting in storage for 2 decades were being listed for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. One sold for $408,000 at PWCC Marketplace in 2021. That single moment of viral attention did not just raise prices. It introduced an entirely new generation of buyers to a market that had been quietly building for years. And then the floodgates opened. Between 2020 and 2021, the Pokemon card market grew by an estimated 700%, not 7%, 700. Card shops that had been barely surviving suddenly had lines around the block. Target and Walmart had to limit purchases per customer because people were buying entire shelves and reselling online at markup. A man in Florida was arrested for stealing $250,000 worth of Pokemon cards from a Target distribution center. This was not a niche hobby anymore. This was a full-blown asset mania. And then, exactly like every mania in history, the market corrected. By 2022, prices on most modern cards had dropped significantly. Sealed product that had been flipping at 3 times retail was suddenly worth close to retail again. A lot of people who bought at the peak lost money, real money. This is the part most creators skip. Pokemon cards are not a guaranteed investment. The modern market is heavily influenced by the Pokemon company's printing decisions, and they print a lot. When demand spikes, they increase supply. That caps how high modern card prices can go. The scarcity story for a 2023 set is a completely different story from the scarcity story for a 1999 base set. So where did the serious money actually survive? Vintage. The cards from 1999 to 2003, the Wizards of the Coast era, before the Pokemon Company took over printing. Those print runs are fixed forever, and the population of high-grade examples only shrinks as cards get lost, damaged, or locked away in private collections that never come back to market. Right now, a PSA 10 Blastoise from the 1999 sells base set sells for around $50,000. A PSA 10 first edition Venusaur around $35,000. These are not household names like Charizard, but they are appreciating steadily because the supply is capped and the collector base keeps growing. And the ceiling of this market? It is genuinely hard to believe. The most expensive Pokemon card ever sold is the Illustrator Pikachu, a promotional card given to winners of an illustration contest in Japan in 1998. Fewer than 40 are known to exist. Logan Paul bought one graded PSA 10 for $5.275 million. He wore it around his neck at a wrestling event, a single Pokemon card, $5 million. But here is what makes Pokemon fundamentally different from every other collectible market. Watches have collectors. Art has collectors. Wine has collectors. But Pokemon has something none of them do. A generation. The people who grew up with Pokemon in the late 1990s are now in their late 20s and 30s. They are entering peak earning years. They have disposable income, deep nostalgia, and an emotional connection to these specific cards that no stock ticker, no bond yield, and no financial instrument on earth can replicate. And that generation is just getting started. The broader lesson here is not that you should go buy Pokemon cards tomorrow. It is that the definition of what counts as a store of value has permanently expanded. For centuries, gold held that role because it was scarce, durable, and universally recognized. A PSA 10 first edition Charizard is scarce, durable once slabbed, and increasingly universally recognized, within a demographic that is only getting wealthier. Whether that holds for another decade, nobody knows. Markets built on nostalgia can fade if the next generation does not attach the same meaning to the object. But so far, every generation that has touched Pokemon has held on, and the ones who held on longest are the ones who came out ahead.